LinkedIn News.
We're so afraid to change things up, to pivot, to do this. We're afraid of giving it all up. And I'm like, blow it up, burn it down, because what's for you will find you.
That's author Jennifer Romolini. I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better. Don't forget to hit that follow button to get new episodes of our show every week. And if you like this conversation, or any others you've heard, I have a favor to ask you. Consider leaving us a review so we can bring you more conversations that you love. If you don't know, here's how to leave a review. On Apple Podcasts, go to the Everyday Better page, scroll down to Ratings and Reviews, and click the number of stars you want to give us. Then, right below that, click Write a Review and add your note to our team. On Spotify, go to our page, click the 3 dots next to the settings wheel, and select Rate Show. We so appreciate your feedback, and as always, thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey everyone, from LinkedIn News, I'm Leah Smart, and this is Everyday Better, a personal development podcast where every week I sit down with some of the world's brightest minds and bravest hearts who use science and story to share strategies for how we can flourish individually, in relationship to others, and to the world around us. We tend to throw the word workaholic around in a pretty carefree way. Sorry, I just need to send this one email. I'm such a workaholic, we might say after pulling out our phone in the middle of a conversation. In some workplaces, calling someone a workaholic might even be a term of endearment. We treat it much more like a character trait than a mental health condition. But research from the past 30 years has shown that being addicted to work is in fact a very real thing with very real and painful consequences for both the person who's addicted to working and the people around them. Workaholics Anonymous has been around since the early 1980s. Like AA, WA is also a 12-step program complete with a handbook. And if you go to the Workaholics Anonymous website, you can fill out a questionnaire to see if you fit the description. I didn't know any of this until I read Ambition Monster by Jennifer Romolini. They say never judge a book by its cover, but when I saw the title of this one, it immediately struck a chord. Ambition Monster is a memoir about Jennifer's journey from blue-collar college dropout to corporate C-suite Barbie. Jennifer broke into the notoriously competitive, ultra-elite world of publishing in the early 2000s. She started out as a fact-checker for Condé Nast, worked her way up to an editor role at Yahoo, and finally reached the top when she landed an executive role at a tech startup in LA. At the peak of her career, Jennifer was a sought-after keynote speaker and role model for women everywhere who craved career success. But like the title implies, Ambition Monster is not a celebration of Jennifer's career journey, it's a reckoning with it. It's about Jennifer's chronic addiction to work, where her addiction came from, and ultimately how she recovered from it. Whether or not you identify as a workaholic, I think all of us can learn from Jennifer's story and investigate the deeper story behind our own ambitions. Here's Jennifer.
I had a really fraught relationship with work. I love work. I was raised blue collar. I have an incredible work ethic. But I really had struggled with a lot of misplaced ambition, ambition for external validation, ambition for the way things looked to the outside world, ambition in the way that I thought, well, if I just look like an unimpeachable success, then I will feel better. I will sort of heal some of these things that are rotting inside of me. And I wanted to write a book about, as I started to unpack that, my relationship with work. I wanted to write a book about what I was learning, which was the connection between workaholism and childhood trauma. And I wanted to better understand that, not in a prescriptive way, but more in a memoir way. I didn't feel qualified necessarily to write how to not be a workaholic, the psychology guide. But I did feel that I could give a first-person account of what that looked like. And I could make those connections from, a chaotic and turbulent childhood with parents who didn't know what they were doing and didn't meet my needs, and how I then went out in the world and tried to get those needs met through accomplishment. I felt like it was relatable.
Well, yeah, it's funny. When our production team first introduced me to your book, I was like, ooh, that title. I was like, oh my God, what? I got to talk to her. Like, what is this? So I'm so curious, like, how did you come up with that title?
Well, it was funny because I'd written a more prescriptive guide to working. It was called Weird in a World That's Not. It was my first book, and it was a guide for people who felt like misfits in the workplace. And it had been optioned to become a TV show. And I had first crack at, what would be the treatment? What would this look like as a sitcom? And I was like, this is a show about monsters. This is a show about people who are just crazy working. And I was like, oh, they're ambition monsters. And so I reused a title for a TV show that never came to be.
What about your ambition was monstrous? Like, I think that's what hits anyone who hears that title. You go, whoa, what does that mean? What does it look like?
Well, it was all consuming. It was bigger than anything else in my life. My relationship with work and my ambition and my need, my sort of compulsive need to go above and beyond, to get that pat on the head, to get that validation, to get a good performance review. And this was way outside of survival, which I think was sort of sewn into this rich tapestry of a mess of dysfunction of how I worked. It was monstrous because of the magnitude, because I never stopped thinking about work, because I'd wake up in the middle of the night and tick off a couple of my to-do list items, because I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and answer emails, because I would be thinking about work while I was bathing my kid, while I was on a date with my husband. I would interrupt conversations with friends, just wait a second, I just need to answer this real fast. It was the most important thing in my life. And if you think about like a horror movie, something that's just looms so large, that's what it was. I mean, and ambition also makes you, like, being sort of blindly ambitious can make you, put aside your values. It can make you make compromises that in retrospect you can't believe you made. I mean, our corporate systems, our work systems are so callous. And if you are blindly thinking about success, you're not present enough to say, wait, is this aligned with who I am? Is this a decision I really should be making? Am I comfortable in this action?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the monstrosity as well.
So I haven't heard of a book until yours that was looking to connect. I'm sure there are some out there, but looking to connect childhood trauma and workaholism. And, obviously not to ask you like specifically what you endured. I'm curious, what you uncovered, in that connection between your childhood and then how things turned out for you at work. I've heard you mention things like hypervigilance,
Yes.
Knowing how to read a room, et cetera. But what would you say you really pulled out of that?
So there's a couple of things, right? So my parents were teenagers when they had me. They did not have high school educations. They had to work, hustle for survival, right? And there's a concept called parentification that happens to children who, not that they weren't loved, but that their needs weren't met, that they had expectations put upon them that were far too mature for their development and their capacity to understand. And I was absolutely a parentification child. My parents had conversations with me because they were so young and not mature enough to understand. I had a lot of worry that was beyond what I should have worried about. They were worried about money. They were worried about my father working. I mean, it was just, I was overwhelmed as a child. And I went above and beyond because I was always trying to prove my goodness, because there was also a level of neglect and there was a level of abuse. But the neglect, let's say, is important because I was seeking, right? I was seeking goodness and for my value to be seen. I became a very diligent person and a very hypervigilant person. And I brought all of those qualities into work. And you see this in other people. I see it all the time. I saw it when I was a manager. People are looking for much more in work than work's able to give them. A sense of value, a sense of self. They're the best employees because they'll do anything. They'll do anything to meet expectations. And they're not even really in it for themselves, or their own personal gain. They're in it for the manager or the organization to reward them so that they can start to try to fill that hole. But that's never going to fill that hole. And then hypervigilance, right? Hypervigilance makes you an incredible employee because you're sitting in a room and you are watching everyone's face. You know how to read a room like spectacularly, and you know how to read your boss. So you're constantly looking for what needs to be done so that you can stay in this job, so you can stay in these people's good graces. And it is, the Workaholics Anonymous will get into that actually many people who become workaholics experience childhood trauma. They're looking for like the feelings of safety that come from, having a solid position in a job, but they're also looking to recreate chaos that they experienced in childhood. So we don't do this consciously, but many of us who grew up in turbulent situations, chaotic, toxic, seek out toxic work environments because we're so accustomed to living in that with our adrenaline all the way up and feeling like we have to be in this survival mode that we're seeking it out. Just like some people seek out toxic partners, we seek out toxic workplaces.
Wow. How did this play out for you when you first moved to New York and you broke into publishing? Like what are some of the lessons that you can take away from how that played out?
So when I got into New York publishing, the book is about this. It's about the connection between workaholism and trauma, but it's also a lot about class, right? And we don't talk about class a lot in this country. We just don't like to talk about it. But what happened to me was I entered the workforce late. I sort of like flailed and failed for a long time, for most of my 20s. And I kind of pulled myself together and went back to school in my late 20s, mid 20s, got into a career by the time I was in my late 20s. And I entered into New York publishing, which is an incredibly elite group of people. And I was a fish out of water. I had no pedigree. I had no connections. And I really didn't understand the rules of this kind of society. And so I was very coarse, and culturally I was not really a fit. I talked in a way that other people didn't talk. I was, more abrasive. And the way I overcame all of those things was by working harder than anybody else, was being the person who was in the office till 1 a.m, was being the person who would take any assignment and turn it around faster than it had to be turned around. I made my work unimpeachable because I was so afraid that they were going to kick me out.
Because you felt like you didn't belong.
I didn't belong.
Yeah. What you're describing so far is incredibly resonant. And like, I think about my own situation, my father's situation, in the sense that like, I have always thought like, oh, my dad's a workaholic. And I know we throw that term around, but like, what does it mean to be someone who, like you said, we don't like to talk about class. And we haven't liked to talk about race. And, the idea of, in the Black community, it's like you have to work twice as hard for just as much. And that's what I grew up hearing.
That's right.
If you want something, you don't get off the hook doing the same amount of work as everyone else.
That's
because
right.
everyone will be watching you 3 times as much as they watch everybody else.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, where did this come from? Like, I don't believe this has always been around. It doesn't feel like it's always been something that we've talked about in popular culture. And yet it is a real thing that people experience. Like, how did we get to a point in our culture where that is sometimes what we praise and what we do?
100%. And like how this really began to explode to the point that it is now is we started exalting work on social media. The 2010s we were hashtag girl bosses, hashtag hustle harder. My side hustle. One of the first moments where this started to really hit me, how messed up all of this was and how wrong-headed and where I felt like we were going in a totally wrong direction. I was on a panel with a group of other women who were business leaders or whatever. And like half the women had books, half the women had rich husbands, like, cause that's the other thing. Like all of these like gurus and entrepreneurs and everything else, most of them either came from wealth or they had wealthy spouses, right? And had also like had their books ghost written and everything else. And we're sitting in this panel and it happens to be mostly Black women are in the audience. And some of the people, the panelists are talking about side hustles. Well, if you can't afford it, you just need a side hustle. And I stood back and I was like, wait a second. We are going to burn everybody out. You are going to be exhausted. We need to slow down. You're going to be fried by the time you're 30 and you're going to have nothing else to give. And I was so disturbed by how easy it was for these women who had all of these financial cushions to tell these young women, well, just work harder. And then also work another job. Maybe get a third one and then put it on social media. Like it's
tell
just
everybody. Yeah,
tell
you're a girl
everybody
boss.
about it. Exactly. I mean, I continue to be disturbed by that. I don't know if I'll ever really get over it. Like, because now we've sort of switched to this like, oh, just be authentic. Just be, I don't even know where we're at now. Now it's just a mush and a mess. It's unclear.
Yeah. Yeah. I graduated college in 2010. So I like entered the workforce at that point when all of this was flying around, and it was like, you create your value by talking about what you're doing on the side. And that was like the generation that I feel like I came into the world with, was you aren't really worthy or that valuable if you don't have something else going on.
Exactly.
It kind of goes into the same conversation of like, how busy are you, right? Like how many things are you working on at once, and how, like, are you a multi-hyphenate that's like constantly burning the candle at both ends? And that's how you create the value for yourself, is to be able to tell people that.
No, it's like productivity porn. It's just, it's obscene. Because the other thing is like this stuff is not actually the big title and like the big salary. Great. Like we all need money, right? But like the biggest scam is you reach the pinnacle or you hit the goal and you look around and you think, wait, this is it? This? I like sacrificed so much for this and hustled
What do you mean?
so hard. Well,
like, why are you like, because so many people listening, imagine, right? Like they would kill to have been in the jobs that you've been in or other jobs that they think of. And they go, well, of course you can say that because you've been there and then you're not there anymore. But like, what's the real feeling of the, like, this is it?
Well, okay. So I get that. This is like incredible privilege. Sometimes I get confused because I'm like, I came from nothing, but like, this is an incredibly privileged position, some of what I'm saying. And I don't know if I would have come to all of this if I had not gotten there, if I hadn't seen it for myself. So let me just say that because that's fair.
So fair. Yeah.
Okay. You see, everyone around you is unhappy. You're in these rooms, you're in these C-suites. Everyone's miserable. There's still so much jockeying for position and curry favoring and so much politics. There's a certain way that people treat you when you're successful that's very confusing, especially if you are a sensitive person, especially if you're a straight shooter. When you're the person in the room that somebody's looking to have the conversation with, right? And everybody wants to talk to you. And then the minute that you lose that job, nobody wants to talk to you anymore. Because it had nothing to do with you. It had to do with your proximity to power, with what you could do for them. Everything at a certain level, I found, becomes highly transactional. And if you're trying to live a connected, authentic life, it's very difficult to operate in those spaces. And then on top of it, it's very difficult to have boundaries around work. Because once you reach that kind of level, you're paying for it with your life. And for me, I would rather make less money, have work take up less of the pie chart in my life, be present for my marriage, for my friends, for my kid, for my parents, be a good daughter, see the world. None of that was available to me when I was working at that level.
Wow. Everything you just described, it's like I think so many of us envision a world where we get to do all those things. We're like, I get to see the world. I get to, finally spend more time with my family or see my friends or have all of this. And then we make this like false association that maybe
Yes.
the more successful we are, maybe the higher we rise, somehow because of that, we'll have either more free time or more access to money so that we can then do these things. But then what you're describing is it's like you get there and you can't. And like the thing I'm most struck by is like you pay for that with your time. You pay for that level of success with your time.
Yeah. And people have read my book and people have interviewed me and said, oh, so you're anti-ambition. And I'm like, absolutely not. I love working and I love ambition. It's just that success is not one size fits all. And we think that it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I am all for ambition that really serves who you are and what you really want and works to your strengths and works to goals that are deeply personal and may change. Part of the reason that I'm able to have this conversation with you today is because I met a certain level of goals in a certain period of my life. And those goals have now entirely changed. And I was lucky to muster the courage to go on another path.
Coming up, the straw that broke the camel's back, the thing that finally forced Jennifer to slow down, pause, and reset her relationship to work. We'll be back in just a few moments. And we're back with Jennifer Romolini, author of Ambition Monster. So many of us aren't, maybe voluntary or involuntarily, we don't get a pause, like a moment to kind of go, what am I doing? Like, where am I headed? And is it really real? And is all of this what I really want? And, you are actually one of the first people I've had on the show who has had an experience that was related to a health issue, but also caused you to stop and listen. You talk about having chronic laryngitis and then having vocal surgery. And for a period of time, not being able to engage and talk with everyone in the same way that most of us do. I'm really curious, in that pause, involuntary pause, right? But in that pause, that moment where your body was like, we need a second, what did you learn or notice?
I think we spend a lot of time trying to get into rooms, right? Like, we just want access. And we spend a lot less time thinking, do I want to be at this table? Do I like this seat? Am I comfortable? Because it's all about that acquisition. And for me, having to sit silently, which is what happened. I had chronic laryngitis. I was a speaker. I led a lot of meetings all throughout the day. I was on a lot of podcasts. And I blew past like several warning signs until the point that I needed to get, not quite emergency surgery, but basically surgery on my vocal cords fairly quickly, and then had an absolute mandated 2-week silent period afterwards.
Wow.
But I didn't stop working because I was a workaholic. So I was in meetings as just the silent person, just observing everything, just listening because I didn't want to miss anything. Because God, what if I missed one thing, right? And while I was sitting in those rooms silently, I realized I did not want to be there. Like my most profound visceral feeling that I felt in my body was, I don't want to be here anymore if I ever did want to be here. That's really hard to come to terms with. Because again, it's like a dream job and people would kill to be here and I should be grateful for this. And what's wrong with me? So we override our instinct and we override what our bodies are telling us, what our hearts are telling us, because we think we should, right? So I overrid that feeling for a long time and I could no longer avoid it because it was the only thing I could hear because I wasn't talking.
So that basically forces you to then look in the mirror and go, what am I doing?
That's what happened to me. I said, what am I doing? And then I still didn't have the courage to leave that job. It was such a good job. I had the health insurance. I was the breadwinner of our family. I made majority of the money. But I stopped working at the pace I'd been working because also in those 2 weeks, I spent a lot more time with my kid and I spent a lot more time with my husband. Even though I wasn't talking, I felt so close to them. And I, had friends who came and brought me things and really people showed up for me. And I realized that I wasn't being reciprocal in the way that I wanted to be reciprocal to all these people who loved me. So I stopped working at the pace I was working. I still did a perfectly serviceable job, but I stopped going above and beyond, and I was fired 6 months later.
Wow. Was that a shock for you?
It was a shock. It was a shock. It was an overwhelming shock, but it was a shame. I felt so ashamed. I had to process the shame. And then under that was grief. I had to process a lot of grief for what I had allowed, how I had allowed myself to be treated by bosses, verbal harassment, the sexual harassment. I grieved the life that I had not shown up for in all the decades that I'd been working like that. And I grieved my complicity for the times where, I did things that I didn't think were right, when I fired people, when I didn't want to fire people, when I towed the company line, So there was shame and there was grief. And it took me a long time to parse all of that out and really heal from it, honestly.
How did you do this? Like, how did you move through this process of, oh my God, this thing I've been doing for years no longer works. And in fact, I've been ignoring my life and the life I want to lead. I have to redo this.
I think presence. First off, I slowed down enough so that I could be present. And I really allowed myself to slowly evaluate things. And eventually you start to build up the muscle, right? So if you're a people pleaser, you'll notice you say yes to things. You're just so, just happy to be invited, right?
Yes.
And I stopped doing that. And that took real practice to be like, I'm so sorry, but I can't take on this project right now. So there's a couple of things there, right? There's scarcity too. Because there's also like, oh my God, if I don't say yes to this, what if nobody offers me anything ever again?
Or they think I'm a total flake or so, whatever
exactly.
it is.
Or what if I ruin my reputation or and you start to, in that presence, you start to see the patterns, your own dysfunctional patterns, right? And it's like, whatever those are for you, mine were a lot about fear, a lot of fear, a lot of scarcity, and a lot of need to have people like me, people that, let's be clear, I didn't respect or like myself, but just the idea that they would have a negative opinion of me or, I let them down in some way. So over time, I started to really recognize my patterns. And once I knew what they were and could identify them, I could disentangle myself from them. But also, this is an ongoing process, right? Like knowing ourselves, knowing what we want, constantly assessing, where am I? Am I happy with this? Not saying yes when you mean no takes a really long time to practice and do as a practice, right? But now My goals are so personal. They have nothing to do with my LinkedIn profile. I don't care what people think of me. I don't care if somebody looks and I don't make sense to them. I make sense to me, right? So now my goals are all set from backtracking from death and saying, what have I not done yet that I feel I might regret before I die? Like, we're not here that long. And we spend so much time, most of us, just wasted in jobs we don't like, doing things we think look good to somebody else or to the outside world. We all have to make money and we need to, put a roof over our head and food on our table, right? But we can choose how we do that.
Yeah.
And if we're going to do a side hustle and we have our basic needs met in our day jobs, that side hustle should bring us joy and nourishment. I think that it's creating that kind of balance in your life. It's not easy, but it's definitely worth fighting for.
Yeah.
So I slow things down. And I don't go above and beyond in jobs anymore. Like, I do the work and I do it very, very well. And I'm very good at what I do. But I don't just sprinkle in a bunch of extra labor so that someone will be like, oh, Jen, you're so great.
Right.
And that took a long, long time to stop. That took probably the last 5 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's like a lot of this work is not just like flip a switch.
No.
It's like you wake up and then you keep waking up and you keep waking up and you're like, oh my God, if you're willing to do it or you're interested in it, it is an untangling process and like kind of an unfolding of whatever it is you want to be or whoever it is you want to be.
And it's painful. Knowing yourself is painful. Change is painful. It's challenging. But I will say this. Because of getting fired and because of the sort of calamity of that and, the financial stress and having to sort of rebuild my life because I was in no place to get another big job and I didn't want another big job. And I've really figured out that things do work out. Like, we're so afraid they're not going to work out because we can't see it. So we're too afraid to try because we can't see the end point yet. When the joy is actually, and the fulfillment actually comes along the road. It's like you set an intention rather than an ambition.
And those are two very different things.
Very different things. The thing is about intention is you start down a path and unexpected things happen that you could not have imagined. It's much more expansive. And that's the delight of life, are those surprises. We're so busy trying to control everything.
Yeah.
Right? That we limit those surprises and that delight.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I will say, having a baby is something for me it's the first moment where I can't write the story. I can't say what's for certain. I can't say what my life will certainly look like in 3 months. And something I've been thinking about, as I, go through this process is, can women have it all? Like,
no.
I want to know your thoughts on this because, it's like we were told in the same framing of the girl boss stage that like we are supposed to also be able to make time for ourselves, make time for our partners, make time for our children, make time for work, and actually be good at everything and still somehow be sane.
No, it's impossible. It's impossible. And that's the great scam, right? Is that we are all trying to make an equation add up that is absolutely mathematically cannot exist. And I for sure did it. And I wish that I hadn't. I wish that I had said, I have to make some decisions here. And what is most important? Because I only have so much to give. it's crazy what we do to women because it's mostly in your 30s. You're still coming up in your career. You're going full steam in your career. You have usually a newish relationship that you're still figuring out how to be in.
Yep.
You tackle keeping a being alive. You're trying to build, financially. It's far too much at once, and something has to give. And what winds up giving is our mental health, our physical health. And those to me now are non-negotiables. And I wish they had always been non-negotiables.
So then what advice do you have for someone if the reality is we can't have it all? But so many of us are taught and also want to be successful and climb career ladders and, see what we can do. And just, it's rewarding to feel like you are accomplishing something.
Yes.
What advice would you give to someone about how to be ambitious without the monstrous part?
Right. Well, first off, I would say make a pie chart of your life, right? Understand this is how much space. There's not another pie. You're not getting another pie. This is it.
Yep.
How are you willing to slice that up? Very thoughtfully, how are you willing to slice that up? And if you're like, you know what, the first couple years of my kid's life, they're not going to remember anything. I'm really going to invest in work now. Fine. Do it however works for you, but just know what you're doing. Be aware, be present. Because if you are aware of what you're doing, you're probably not going to regret it because you've had this conversation with yourself. And set for yourself what is non-negotiable. Your mental health, your physical health, your connection to a partner, perhaps. Set non-negotiables and be true to yourself that they will be non-negotiable. And ask for help because we were not built to do these things on our own.
That piece seems huge in the sense that I think it's really easy to feel like if I'm independent, right, all in the same frame of, girl bossing or having it all, if I'm independent, I don't need help. And so asking for help is a sign of weakness. Where obviously in reality, we all actually want to help each other. Like if someone asks me for help who I care about, I'm like, yes, of course I'll help you. And I imagine I'd get the same in return. So I think that's really powerful. You've described, earlier you said, I was waking up in the middle of the night. I was, working in the middle of the night. I was, having all these different moments where for you, workaholism was taking over your life. You were, not necessarily prioritizing relationships and all of these things. I'm curious for you today, what does ambition look like?
My ambition is to live a balanced life. That is really it. I want to be contributing to a 401k. I want to make enough money that I can help support my family, that I can help my kid pay for college, those kinds of financial priorities. I really look at work to fulfill those needs. And then I kind of separate creativity out from that. So my ambition for creativity and I really want to write a novel. And I've set up a system so that I can, devote 10 hours a week to writing a novel, and we'll see how it goes. I just want to make sure that my personal resume is being built at the same pace as my professional resume. And I think that's what I'm really ambitious for now.
I love that. Jennifer, I want you to complete these 3 statements for me. The first is better humans are
self-aware.
Better work is
boundaried.
And a better world has
kind people.
Love that. Thank you so much for being here. This was great. And I feel your passion and I love it. And I hope that for people listening, that this is a really valuable takeaway from someone who's been in positions that, we all have hoped to be in and also has a lot to say about the way in which we orient our lives. So I really just appreciate you sharing your lived experience, which is obviously wisdom now that I think a lot of people need.
Thank you so much. This conversation was a pleasure. Thank you.
That was Jennifer Romolini, author of Ambition Monster. If you like this conversation, text it to the first person who comes to mind. It might be just what they needed to hear. Everyday Better is a production of LinkedIn News. The show is produced by Grace Rubin and Emily Reeves. Asaf Gadron is our sound engineer. He makes sure we sound good in the studio. Tim Bolin mixed our show. Andres Cardona is our video producer. We get additional support from Alex Kuznetsova and Ali McPherson. Sarah Storm is our senior producer. Enrique Montalvo is our executive producer. Dave Pond is head of production and creative operations. Maya Pope-Chappelle is director of content and audience development. Courtney Coop is head of original programming. Dan Roth is the editor-in-chief of LinkedIn. And I'm Leah Smart. Thanks for coming with me, and I'll see you next week.